So hello and welcome to episode 31. In this episode we are going to be looking at encapsulation. So to get us started, I already have this student class here. So the meaning of encapsulation is to make sure that sensitive data is hidden from users. And to achieve this, you must, there's actually two things that you need to do. So one is you need to declare class variables or attributes as private. Then the second thing that you need to do is to provide public get and set methods to access and update the value of a private variable, as it were. So let's actually go ahead within the student class and create two attributes. So we will have a private string and we'll call this one name. Then let's also have another private int called level. All right, so if you are following along with if you've been following along with the series, you'd remember that in the last episode we looked at access modifiers, and we saw that the keyword private basically means that a particular attribute, method, or constructor is going to belong to a class, right? So it means that we cannot access it outside of that class. But you'd realize that for the most part you want to have you are creating objects and methods and whatnot, and you realize that sometimes you want to have your code, or you want to make use of a particular method or attribute outside of that the particular class in which it resides. So how then do you go about it if you have declared it as private? So maybe you might think that you can just access it just like that. So maybe let's actually try that. Let's create another class called new student, or maybe let's call it uses student, so that it's more descriptive, as it were. Or maybe let's just make it use student, right? So use student, what we want to do is that we want to first let's actually have a main method. Then within the main method, let's try and let's create a student. Then let's call this one stud1 or stud1, or let's give the student a name. Maybe let's call him Ben, and let's call the new constructor. Actually, since we've looked at constructors, no, that's fine. Let's just use the default constructor. I was thinking to actually put some logic within the constructor, but maybe let's actually do that later on as we progress with the series. So let's actually try and say Ben dot we know that there's a name attribute, right? So Ben dot name is equal to, let's call him Ben, since we already have a variable called Ben. So I want you to notice what's going to happen. It's actually the Java is actually not going to let us compile the code, because it actually sees that there's something wrong here. So it's going to tell us that the field student.name is not visible, right? So you can see from here that Java can see the student class, but since the name attribute has been declared as private, it means it's not accessible inside of this class. So we need to fix this. We need to be able to fix this. So how do we go about it? So Java provides us something that are called getters and setters, and basically these are just methods that you use to access or to get and set values for your private attributes, right? So what you can do is inside of your IDE, I'm actually just going to use the feature to auto-generate these. So it's giving me a lot, really. Let me just remove this, because I do not want those comments. I don't want to confuse you guys with a lot of content. So maybe let me just have getters and setters for the name for now. So we have get name, then we have set name. That's all we need for now. Then let me get rid of these comments right here. Actually those are Java docs. Alright, so now you realize that we have a public method and it is a return type of string, and the name is appropriately called get name. So it's actually convention that for your getters and setters, in order for you to get this name, right, you actually have to call it get name, and in order to set the student's name, you actually have to call it set name. So we have public, simply meaning to say that we are actually going to access the get name and the set name methods outside of this student class. Then for a getter, you want to get the name for this particular student. So the return type is going to be string, right? Then we simply have the return keyword and the name that we want to return. So let's actually come here, and instead of doing this, let's actually say Ben, which is the name of our object, then dot. So I want you to notice that we now have this method called get name, right? Then what we can do maybe in this case, let's actually come here briefly. Let's actually give the default value of what? Of Ben. Then we can come in here, and then we are going to get the name, as it were. So let me just clear out my console, then compile this. So let's compile use student.java. So it's compiled. Then the next thing that's going to happen is that we need to run this. So let's run use student, and you realize that we get, actually we are not going to get anything down there in the console. The reason why is we are not really doing anything with it. So maybe let's sys out, then put that in there. Then let's compile it one more time and then run it. So we should get Ben printed down there in the console. So as you'd expect, we get Ben there. So yeah, that's the essence of a getter, right? So a getter basically is going to allow you to get or to retrieve the particular value for an attribute, right? So in this case, it's actually going to allow us to retrieve this private attribute of type string, and within the string we actually have the name Ben right in there. Then we can also, since we have a getter, we also have something called a setter, and a setter is actually going to make us it's going to allow us to be able to set a particular value for an attribute that is declared as private. So let's actually come down here, and we're actually going to say Ben dot so we need to set the name to something else. So maybe let's say the name is now something else, right? Then we are simply going to repeat this, and we actually want to see what's going to happen right here. So compile the code one more time, then run it. So this is what happened. Initially we created an object called student, right? Rather an object called Ben from the student class, and by default you see that this private string name has a default value of Ben, right? So when we run ben.getName, what it's actually going to get is it's going to return the name that is declared within the class. So the value for this attribute is Ben initially by default, right? But now on line number 7, what we did now is we called the setName method, right? And if we look at the setName method, it's actually declared as public, so it means we can access it from here. That's how we are able to access it. Then its return type is what? It's void, and it's also the name is setName, right? And it also has a parameter called name. So this parameter called name, we will actually call it X, right? Then so that is I differentiate it from the name that is here, so that you can actually see how it's working. So now what happens is that the setName method, it takes a parameter or an argument of type string, and it's going to set this class's name attribute to the value of X right here. So this is what this keyword does. It's taking this class's name attribute and setting it to whatever you have passed in as an argument to the setName method right there. So that's why you see here that we now set the name for the Ben object to something else, and when we run it, we are going to get something else printed down there in the console. So yeah, I think that's the essence of getters and setters, and also that's the essence of encapsulation. So basically, just to recap, encapsulation is making sure that sensitive data is hidden from users. So without these particular getter and setter methods, you wouldn't be able to access these private attributes that we have on line 7 and line 8 there. So you always want to make sure that your attributes are declared as private, then you give getters and setters, you make your getters and setters public so that you can access them from outside of the class. So yeah, I think that's just about it for this episode. I'll see you in the next one.